I woke up on Christmas morning to the sound of nothing. When you've lived 68 years on this earth, you learn that silence speaks its own language. Sometimes it whispers peace, sometimes it screams loneliness. But that Christmas morning, the silence didn't whisper or scream. It simply stated a fact I'd been too afraid to hear. I've always been an early riser. My body wakes me at 5:45 without fail, a habit formed over decades of being the first one up, the first one ready, the first one to make sure everyone else had what they needed. On Christmas, I'm usually up even earlier, that childlike excitement never quite leaving you, no matter how old you get. I'd be thinking about the cinnamon rolls rising in the refrigerator, the stockings hanging by the fireplace, the way my grandson Tommy's eyes would light up when he saw the remote control car I'd hidden in the back of my closet. But that morning, lying in bed and staring at the ceiling of the guest room in my son's house, something felt wrong. The house was too still. No footsteps padding down the hallway. No excited whispers of a 5-year-old trying to wake his parents to see if Santa had come. No smell of coffee brewing, which was strange because John always made the first pot on Christmas morning. He knew I liked it strong, French roast with just a touch of cream. I sat up slowly, my joints protesting the way they do these days, and reached for my robe. It was burgundy velvet, worn soft from years of Christmas mornings, and it smelled faintly of the lavender sachets I keep in all my drawers. A habit I learned from my mother, passed down like so many small rituals that make a life. I opened my bedroom door and stepped into the hallway. The morning light was just beginning to filter through the skylight above the stairs, pale and gray, the kind of winter light that makes everything look muted. But it wasn't the light that caught my attention. It was what the light was illuminating. Nothing. The hallway was empty, silent. No toys scattered near Tommy's door where he usually left them before bed. No shoes by the stairs where John always kicked his off, despite his wife Claire's constant reminders to put them in the closet. "John?" I called out, my voice sounding small in the emptiness. "Claire?" No answer. I walked down the hallway, my slippers shuffling against the hardwood floor John had installed last year. The floor I'd helped pay for when he mentioned they were having trouble with the mortgage after Claire's maternity leave. I peeked into Tommy's room. The bed was made, not slept in. His favorite stuffed elephant, the one he called Mr. Trunks and never went anywhere without, was gone. My heart started beating faster. Not panic yet, just confusion. Maybe they went out early, I told myself. Maybe John wanted to surprise Claire with breakfast at that French cafe she loved. Maybe they took Tommy to see the Christmas lights one more time before they had to come down. Yes, that had to be it. I made my way downstairs, holding the railing carefully. I've learned to be cautious on stairs. At 68, a fall isn't just painful, it's dangerous. As I descended, I kept expecting to hear something. The front door opening. Voices calling out that they'd just stepped out for a moment, but the house remained silent. When I reached the kitchen, I stopped in the doorway. The counters were clean, too clean. On Christmas morning, there's supposed to be organized chaos. Wrapping paper waiting to be used for last-minute gifts, coffee cups left out. The special Christmas plates we only used once a year sitting ready on the counter. Instead, everything was put away, spotless, as if no one was planning to use this kitchen today at all. I walked over to the coffee maker and touched it. Cold. That's when I saw the driveway through the kitchen window. I moved closer, my hand pressing against the cool glass. Both cars were gone. John's black SUV, the one I'd co-signed the loan for 2 years ago, when his credit wasn't quite good enough. Claire's sedan, the one they'd bought when she was pregnant with Tommy. Both spaces empty, just oil stains on the pavement where they usually parked. Before we continue, let me ask you something. Where are you right now? What time is it where you are? I'd love to know if you're listening to this on Christmas morning yourself, or maybe you're somewhere warm, somewhere far from winter, trying to understand how a mother ends up alone on the day that's supposed to be about family. Drop a comment and let me know. And if this story is speaking to you, if you've ever felt that particular kind of invisible that comes from being taken for granted, Please hit that like button. Subscribe if you haven't already. These stories matter because they remind us we're not alone in what we feel. Now, let me continue. I turned away from the window, my mind trying to arrange the pieces into something that made sense. John wouldn't just leave without telling me. We'd talked about today just yesterday afternoon. I'd asked what time he wanted me to start on the cinnamon rolls. He'd reminded me that Tommy wanted to open presents before breakfast this year, a new tradition since he was finally old enough to understand what Christmas meant. And then I saw it, a small envelope propped against the coffee maker, my name written on the front in Claire's careful handwriting. The letters perfectly formed, slightly slanted, the kind of handwriting that looks effortless but probably took years of practice to perfect. My hands felt strangely steady as I picked it up. I opened it slowly, sliding my finger under the flap, pulling out a single piece of cream-colored stationery. Claire's personal stationery, the expensive kind with her initials embossed at the top. I read the words once, then again, then a third time, as if reading them more carefully would somehow change what they said. Mom, we decided to spend Christmas in Paris this year. It was a last-minute opportunity. John's colleague offered us his apartment. We thought about inviting you, but the flight is so long, and you've mentioned before how difficult travel is at your age. We didn't want you to be uncomfortable. We'll be back after New Year's. There's food in the fridge, and the TV remote is on the coffee table. Enjoy the quiet. Love, Claire and John. I stood there holding that note, and the strangest thing happened. I didn't cry. I thought I would. I thought I'd feel my throat close up, my eyes burn, my chest tighten with that awful pressure that comes right before tears. But none of that came. Instead, I felt very, very calm. I read the note one more time, focusing on specific phrases. We decided. Not, we wish you could have come, or we're so sorry. Just, we decided. And that part about travel being difficult at my age. Had I said that? I tried to remember. I'd mentioned once, maybe 6 months ago, that the turbulence on a flight to my sister's had been unpleasant, but difficult? I'd never said travel was difficult. I'd never said I couldn't handle it. But that wasn't really the point, was it? The point was that they'd made a choice, a family vacation, Paris, Christmas week. And somewhere in all that planning, booking the flights, packing the suitcases, arranging for the apartment, they'd decided I didn't fit. I set the note down on the counter, smoothing it out carefully, and walked over to the coffee maker. My hands moved automatically, measuring grounds, pouring water, pressing the button. The machine gurgled to life, and I stood there watching it drip, drip, drip into the pot. The clock on the wall ticked steadily, 6:20 in the morning, Christmas Day. I poured myself a cup when it was ready, added cream the way I like it, and carried it over to the kitchen table. I sat down in what had become my usual chair over the past 2 years, the one facing the window where I could see the bird feeder John had hung in the backyard last spring. A chickadee landed on it as I watched, small and gray against the white snow that had fallen during the night. It pecked at the seeds for a moment, then flew away. I sipped my coffee slowly, letting the warmth spread through me. And for the first time in a very long time, I let myself think clearly, really, truly clearly, not about what I should feel, or what a good mother would do, or how I should react to keep the peace. Just what was actually true. And the truth was this. I was sitting alone in my son's house on Christmas morning, drinking coffee I'd made myself after he and his family had flown to Paris without telling me. They'd left a note, not made a phone call, not invited me, not even had the decency to tell me to my face. A note. I set my coffee cup down and looked around the kitchen. At the refrigerator I'd bought when they said their old one wasn't big enough for a family of 3. At the new dishwasher I'd installed because Claire wanted something quieter, at the table where I'd shared hundreds of meals and always making sure everyone else had seconds before I took any for myself. And sitting there in that silent house, with that note on the counter and an empty driveway outside, something inside me shifted. I didn't cry. I just started thinking. Sitting there with my coffee, my mind drifted back. Not to escape what had just happened, but to understand how I'd arrived at this moment, how I'd become the kind of person who could be left behind on Christmas morning without a second thought. It started 2 years ago when my husband Richard died. We'd been married for 43 years. He went peacefully in his sleep, which everyone said was a blessing, and maybe it was. But peaceful or not, losing him left a hole in my life that I didn't know how to fill. Our condominium, the one we'd downsized to after Richard retired, suddenly felt too big and too empty all at once. I remember standing in our bedroom a few weeks after the funeral, looking at Richard's side of the closet. His shirt still hung there, pressed and waiting, his shoes lined up neatly on the rack. I couldn't bring myself to touch them yet. That's when John showed up. He'd been checking on me regularly, calling every other day, stopping by with groceries I hadn't asked for. At first, I was grateful. It felt good to know someone cared, that I wasn't completely alone in the world. One evening, he sat me down at my small kitchen table, the same table where Richard and I had shared our morning coffee for 15 years. "Mom," he said, his voice gentle, concerned. "I've been thinking, you shouldn't be alone right now. It's not healthy." I told him I was managing just fine. And I was. Grief is hard, but I'd learned over the years that being alone and being lonely are two different things. But John persisted. "Claire and I have been talking. We have that guest room that's just sitting empty. Tommy would love having his grandmother closer. And honestly, Mom, we could use your help. Claire's career is really taking off, and childcare is so expensive." The way he said it made it sound like we'd both be helping each other, like it was a partnership. "You could keep your condo," he continued. "But wouldn't it be nice to wake up to Tommy's laughter, to have family around? You've always said how much you missed having a full house." When he put it that way, how could I say no? I thought about those quiet mornings in my empty condo, making coffee for one, eating dinner alone while the television hummed in the background. The idea of being surrounded by life again, by laughter and noise and purpose, it felt like exactly what I needed. So I said yes. John was thrilled. He hugged me tight and promised it would be wonderful. "We're going to take such good care of you, Mom." What he didn't mention right away was that they needed help with a down payment on a bigger house. The one they were renting was too small, he explained a few days later. But if we pooled our resources, we could get something really nice. Something with a proper guest suite for me. Maybe even a small garden. I had the money. Richard had been careful with our savings, and the life insurance policy had been generous. John said I could think of it as an investment in our family's future, in Tommy's future. I wrote the check without hesitation. Looking back now, I can see how it all unfolded, how each small decision led to the next, how I walked willingly into a situation I mistook for love. But at the time, I was just a widow who wanted to feel needed again. The first few months in the new house were exactly what John had promised. I'd wake up to the sound of Tommy giggling in the next room. Claire would ask my advice about recipes. John would sit with me in the evenings and tell me about his day at work. I felt useful again. I took care of Tommy while John and Claire worked. I'd make his breakfast, play educational games with him, read him stories before his nap. When Claire mentioned they were struggling with the cost of a good preschool, I quietly offered to pay for it. When John said the house needed new gutters and they were trying to save up, I took care of it. It felt good to help. To be the kind of mother and grandmother who could ease their burdens. They called me a blessing. That word came up a lot. "You're such a blessing, Mom. We're so blessed to have you here." I wore that word like a warm coat. But somewhere along the way, things shifted. It happened so gradually that I didn't notice at first. The requests for help became expectations. The gratitude became assumptions. When I suggested maybe I'd like to visit my friend Margaret for a weekend, Claire looked surprised. "But what about Tommy? We have plans that weekend." When I mentioned I was tired one evening and might order takeout instead of cooking, John seemed annoyed. "We were counting on you, Mom. Claire's been looking forward to your pot roast all day." The phrase, "we were counting on you," came up more and more. I started to feel less like family and more like staff. But I told myself I was being sensitive. They were busy, stressed, working hard. Of course, they relied on me. That's what family does. We help each other. Then came the moment that should have woken me up sooner. It was about 8 months ago. I wasn't feeling well, just a summer cold, and I'd gone to lie down early. I was in my room with the door cracked open when I heard Claire on the phone in the hallway. I know, she was saying to someone, her voice carrying that tone people use when they're venting. She means well, but she's so set in her ways. Everything has to be done her way. Honestly, sometimes it's exhausting. There was a pause while the person on the other end spoke. Oh, we can't ask her to leave, Claire continued. John would feel terrible. Plus, she helps with so much. The bills, Tommy, the house. Honestly, I don't know how we managed before. I lay very still in my bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling something cold settle in my chest. She kept talking. Between you and me, I think she's lonely and we're just filling that void for her. Which is fine, I guess. We get help with Tommy and the bills. She gets to feel needed. It works out. It works out, as if I was a transaction, a business arrangement. I didn't confront her. I didn't mention what I'd heard. I just filed it away in some quiet corner of my mind and kept going. Because what else could I do? Where else would I go? I convinced myself I'd misunderstood, that Claire was just having a bad day, that she didn't really mean it the way it sounded. But after that, I started noticing other things. The way they'd make plans without asking if I wanted to join. The way Claire would reorganize things I'd done, moving them to where she preferred them. The way John would talk about their house and their decisions, even though my name was on the deed alongside his, and I'd paid far more than half of everything. I was living in their space, helping raise their child, maintaining their home. But I was doing it with my money, on my time, with my energy. Sitting at that kitchen table on Christmas morning, holding my coffee and staring at that note, all of those memories arranged themselves into a pattern I couldn't ignore anymore. I hadn't been invited to live with them because they loved me. I'd been invited because I was useful, and the moment I might be inconvenient. A long flight, a cramped apartment in Paris. The need to adjust their plans, they'd left me behind without a second thought. I finished my coffee and stood up slowly. For 2 years, I'd convinced myself this was my home, but it wasn't. It was their house, one I'd been paying for while pretending I belonged. And as I rinsed my cup in the sink and placed it carefully in the dish rack, I realized something that should have scared me but didn't. I was done pretending. I picked up that note again, my fingers tracing over Claire's perfect handwriting. She'd probably written it quickly, maybe while packing Tommy's favorite toys, squeezing it in between choosing outfits and booking museum tickets. Travel is so difficult at your age. That sentence bothered me more than the rest. Not because it was cruel, but because it was so casual, so certain. As if she knew me well enough to decide what I could or couldn't handle without ever asking. Had I ever complained about travel? Really complained? I'd taken the train to Margaret's just 3 months ago. I'd managed fine. A little tired maybe, but nothing I couldn't handle. But that wasn't really the point, was it? The point was that they'd made a choice. A family vacation to Paris for Christmas. And somewhere in all that excitement, looking at photos of the Eiffel Tower, planning which cafes to visit, imagining Tommy's face when he saw the lights along the Champs-Élysées, they'd decided I didn't fit. I folded the note carefully and slipped it into the pocket of my robe. Then I walked through the house slowly, my slippers shuffling against the floors I'd helped refinish. The living room was decorated exactly as I'd left it 2 days ago. The Christmas tree stood in the corner, lights twinkling on a timer, presents underneath wrapped in paper I'd bought and paid for. I walked closer and knelt down, my knees protesting to read the tags. To Tommy, from Grandma Nina. To John, from Mom. To Claire, from Nina. I'd spent weeks shopping for these gifts. The remote control car for Tommy that he'd been begging for since September. The new tablet for John that he'd mentioned wanting for work. The cashmere scarf for Claire in the exact shade of blue she'd admired at the department store. They were supposed to open these this morning, as a family. I stood up slowly, looking around the room. The sectional sofa, mine, purchased when they said their old couch was too small for entertaining. The coffee table. Mine, bought because Claire wanted something more modern. The entertainment center. Mine, installed because John needed better storage for his electronics. Even the Christmas tree stand was mine. I'd bought it last year when their old one broke. I moved into the dining room. The table that sat 8, mine. The china cabinet displaying the good dishes, mine. The chandelier overhead that Claire had fallen in love with at a lighting store, mine. In the kitchen, I opened cabinets one by one. The mixer, the food processor, the expensive knife set, the copper pots Claire had wanted for her birthday. All mine. The refrigerator hummed beside me. Stainless steel, French doors, ice maker, water dispenser. Their old one had worked perfectly fine, but Claire wanted something that looked better for when they had dinner parties. I'd made that wish possible. I walked upstairs to my room, the guest suite, as they called it, and sat on the edge of my bed. On my nightstand was a photograph of Richard, taken maybe 5 years before he died. He was smiling at something outside the frame, his eyes crinkling at the corners the way they always did when he was truly happy. "What would you think about all this?" I asked his picture softly. Richard had always been practical, generous when it mattered, but clear-eyed about people's motivations. He would have seen what was happening long before I did. He probably would have pulled me aside months ago and asked me, gently, why I was working so hard to buy affection. I opened the drawer of my nightstand. Inside was a large envelope, the kind with a clasp and gusset that expands to hold documents. I'd always been organized, the type of person who kept receipts and warranty cards and instruction manuals filed away neatly. Richard used to tease me about it. "You could track down a receipt from 5 years ago if you needed to," he'd say, shaking his head with amusement. I pulled out the envelope and opened it. Page after page of receipts and bank statements, every major purchase I'd made since moving into this house. Each one with my name printed clearly at the top. Down payment on the house, furniture, appliances, repairs, renovations, even the landscaping in the backyard. I flipped through them slowly, not reading every detail, just remembering. Each piece of paper represented a moment when I'd thought I was helping, when I'd believed I was being a good mother, a good grandmother, a valued member of the family. But looking at them now, they felt different. They felt like proof. I closed the envelope and held it in my lap, feeling its weight. Not heavy, really, but substantial. Important. "It's all mine anyway," I whispered to the empty room. The words surprised me, not because they weren't true, but because saying them out loud made something shift inside my chest. Something that had been tight for a very long time loosened just a fraction. I stood up and walked to my closet, pulling out my phone from where I'd left it charging overnight. I didn't use it much, mostly just to call Margaret or check the weather, but I knew how to look things up when I needed to. I typed slowly, my fingers not quite used to the small keyboard. Moving company near me. Several results appeared. I scrolled through them, reading reviews, looking at ratings. One had particularly good comments. Family-owned, people said, professional, respectful, careful with belongings. I tapped the phone number. It rang 3 times before someone answered. A woman's voice, friendly and alert despite the early hour. "Good morning, Prestige Moving. This is Sandra. How can I help you?" I took a breath. "Good morning. I need to schedule a move as soon as possible. After the holiday weekend, if you have availability." There was a brief pause. "Let me check our schedule. We have a crew available on the 27th. That's this Thursday. Would that work for you?" "That would work perfectly," I said, my voice calm and certain. "Wonderful. Can I get your name and address?" I gave her the information, speaking clearly, taking my time. "And how much are we moving?" she asked. "Full house or just a few items?" I looked around my bedroom, then thought of the living room, the kitchen, the dining room. "Quite a bit," I said. "I'll have a detailed list ready for you." "Perfect. We can have a crew there by 9 a.m. on Thursday. We'll need a destination address as well." "I'm working on that," I said. "I'll call back with those details tomorrow." We finished the arrangements and I hung up. The house was still quiet around me, but the silence felt different now. Not empty, not sad, just waiting. I sat back down at my desk and pulled out a notepad and pen. At the top of the first page, I wrote, "Items to move." Then I started listing everything, every single thing I'd ever paid for. I worked for 2 hours, cross-referencing my receipts, making sure I didn't miss anything. The television, the sound system, the furniture, the appliances, the artwork on the walls that I'd bought because Claire said the rooms looked bare, the area rugs, the lamps, the decorative pieces on the shelves, even smaller things, the coffee maker, the toaster, the vacuum cleaner, the set of tools in the garage, the lawnmower. By the time I finished, I had 4 full pages in my neat handwriting. Each line represented money I'd spent, yes. But more than that, it represented a piece of myself I'd given away while believing I was building something. A family. A home. A place where I mattered. I set down my pen and flexed my fingers, looking at the list. It was comprehensive, thorough, undeniable. My stomach rumbled quietly, reminding me I hadn't eaten anything since that cup of coffee hours ago. I glanced at the clock. Nearly noon. I went downstairs and opened the refrigerator. Inside was the Christmas dinner I'd planned to make: a small turkey breast, fresh vegetables, ingredients for my mother's famous stuffing recipe. Everything I'd bought 2 days ago when I still thought I'd be spending today surrounded by family. I pulled out eggs and cheese, deciding to make myself an omelet. Something simple, just for me. As I cooked, I thought about the past 2 years, all those moments when I'd pushed down my own needs, my own desires, telling myself that's what family required. All those times I'd bitten my tongue when Claire reorganized something I'd done. All those evenings I'd been too tired to cook, but did it anyway because they were counting on me. I'd made myself smaller and smaller, trying to fit into the shape of what they needed, and they'd let me. They'd taken everything I offered and then left me behind the moment I might require something from them in return. The omelet was perfect, fluffy, golden, filled with sharp cheddar. I ate it at the kitchen table, looking out at the snow-covered backyard, and felt full in a way I hadn't in months. Not just my stomach, something deeper. After I cleaned up, I opened my laptop. Time to find a new place to live. I spent the afternoon searching, taking my time, being careful. I didn't want just anywhere. I wanted somewhere that felt right. Somewhere that would be mine. Completely and entirely mine. By evening, I'd found it. A small 2-bedroom apartment in a building for active seniors on the other side of town. It had a balcony, a community room, a small garden where residents could grow vegetables in the summer. The rent was reasonable, and they had immediate availability. I filled out the application online, then called the property manager. Her name was Alice, and she sounded kind. "I can do a showing tomorrow if you'd like," she offered. "I know it's the day after Christmas, but I'll be in the office." "Tomorrow would be perfect," I said. After we hung up, I sat back in my chair and looked around the kitchen one more time. At the note still sitting on the counter, at the expensive appliances, at the life I'd been living that had never really been mine. Tomorrow I would see the apartment. Thursday, the movers would come. And by the time John and Claire returned from Paris, this house would look very different. They'd left me behind without a word. I was simply returning the favor. The apartment was perfect. Alice met me in the lobby at 10 o'clock the next morning, the day after Christmas. She was a woman in her early 50s with kind eyes and a warm smile, wearing jeans and a sweater despite it being her day off. "Mrs. Cardwell," she said, extending her hand. "I'm so glad you could make it. Come on up, let me show you around." We took the elevator to the 3rd floor. The building was quiet, peaceful. Clean hallways with soft lighting and plants on small tables between the apartment doors. It felt cared for, intentional. "Here we are," Alice said, unlocking the door to Unit 3C. "It's one of our larger 2-bedroom units." She pushed the door open and I stepped inside. Sunlight poured through the windows, illuminating warm hardwood floors. The living room was spacious enough for my furniture without feeling crowded. The kitchen was compact but functional, with white cabinets and newer appliances. There were 2 bedrooms, one for me, one that could be a guest room or an office, and a bathroom with a walk-in shower instead of a tub. But what caught my attention was the balcony. I walked over and opened the sliding glass door, stepping outside into the cold morning air. The balcony overlooked a small courtyard with benches and a fountain. Trees lined the edges, bare now in winter, but promising shade in summer. I could already imagine myself out here with my morning coffee, watching the seasons change. "The community room is on the first floor," Alice was saying behind me. "There's a book club, movie nights, exercise classes. But everyone respects privacy, too. You can be as social or as private as you like." I turned to look at her. "I'd like to take it," she smiled. "Would you like to see the second bedroom first?" "That won't be necessary. This is exactly what I need." An hour later, I'd signed the lease, paid the deposit and first month's rent, and received my keys. Alice gave me a welcome packet with information about the building and a list of nearby services: grocery stores, pharmacies, doctor's offices. "You can move in any time," she said as we walked back to the lobby. "The unit's ready." "Thursday," I told her. "I'll be moving in Thursday." That afternoon, I called Sandra at Prestige Moving back with the destination address. Then I went through the theme mouse one more time, making absolutely certain of what was mine. I used small sticky notes, the kind you can remove easily, placing them on every item on my list. Blue notes for furniture, yellow for appliances, pink for decorative items. By the time I finished, the house looked like it had been marked for an estate sale, which, in a way, it had been. The estate of a woman who'd given too much to people who valued her too little. I slept well that night, better than I had in months. No anxiety, no second-guessing, no wondering if I was doing the right thing. Just deep, peaceful sleep. Thursday morning arrived clear and cold. I woke at 5:45 as always, and went through my morning routine with unusual clarity of purpose. I showered, dressed in comfortable clothes suitable for a moving day, and went downstairs to make breakfast. I cooked myself a proper meal: scrambled eggs, toast, fresh fruit. While I ate, I reviewed my list one more time, checking it against the sticky notes throughout the house. Everything was in order. At 8:30, I heard the truck pull into the driveway. I looked out the window and saw a large white moving van with blue lettering on the side: Prestige Moving and Storage. 3 people climbed out, 2 men and a woman, all probably in their 30s, wearing matching navy blue shirts and work gloves. I'd baked cookies the night before, chocolate chip because they're universally liked, and I needed this to go smoothly. I arranged them on a plate, put on a fresh pot of coffee, and opened the front door before they could knock. "Good morning," I said, smiling warmly. "You must be from Prestige Moving." The woman stepped forward. She was tall with dark hair pulled back in a ponytail and an air of quiet competence. "Yes, ma'am. I'm Maria. This is James and Kyle. We're here for your move." "Wonderful. Please come in. I've made coffee and cookies." "You'll need your energy today." They exchanged glances, probably surprised to be greeted with refreshments at 9 in the morning, 2 days after Christmas. But they followed me inside, wiping their feet carefully on the mat. "This is very thoughtful," Maria said, accepting a cup of coffee. "Most people are pretty stressed on moving day." "I'm not stressed at all," I said pleasantly. "I've been planning this very carefully." James, the younger of the 2 men with red hair and freckles, took a cookie and bit into it. His eyes widened. "These are really good, ma'am." "Thank you, dear. My late husband always said my chocolate chip cookies were the best he'd ever tasted." I set down the plate and picked up my envelope of documentation. "Now, let me explain how this is going to work. I have a list of items to be moved, and I have receipts for each one. Everything's marked with sticky notes to make it easy." Maria set down her coffee cup, suddenly more businesslike. "Receipts?" Yes, you see, everything we'll be moving today belongs to me. I purchased it all myself. I just want to be thorough so there's no confusion. I handed her the list. She scanned it, her eyebrows rising slightly as she read. This is quite extensive. I know. I've been generous over the years. I smiled softly. But now it's time for these things to come with me. Kyle, who had been quiet until now, looked around the living room. So we're taking the TV, the couch, the tables, everything with the blue notes? Everything with any colored note, I confirmed. Blue, yellow, or pink. Would you like to see the receipts as we go? I find it helps to be organized. Maria looked at me for a long moment, and I could see her processing the situation. She was smart enough to understand this wasn't a typical moving job, but I'd been nothing but polite, had all my documentation ready, and was clearly in complete control of the situation. That won't be necessary, ma'am, she said finally. If you say it's yours, that's good enough for us. We just move what you tell us to move. Perfect. Let's start with the living room, shall we? They got to work with impressive efficiency. Maria directed the other two with quiet authority. They wrapped the television carefully in blankets, securing it with tape and padding. Kyle disconnected all the cables, coiling them neatly and labeling them. James helped lift the TV onto a dolly, and together, they wheeled it out to the truck. Next came the sectional sofa. It took all three of them to maneuver it through the doorway, tilting it at angles, communicating in that shorthand way people develop when they work together regularly. On three. 1, 2, 3. I watched them work, occasionally checking items off my list. Each piece of furniture that disappeared through that door felt like taking a breath after holding it too long. The coffee table, the end tables, the lamps, the entertainment center, the bookshelf with all of Claire's design magazines still on it. I'd bought the bookshelf. The magazines could stay. By 11 Hunka, the living room was nearly empty. The space looked bigger somehow, the walls bare where frames had hung, the floor marked with indentations where furniture legs had rested for 2 years. Dining room next? Maria asked, pulling off her gloves to take a break. Yes, please. The table, chairs, and china cabinet. Oh, and there are boxes in the kitchen with my dishes and cookware. They moved through the house like a well-oiled machine. The dining room emptied. The kitchen appliances, refrigerator, mixer, food processor, even the expensive coffee maker, all loaded carefully into the truck. Kyle's eyes widened when he unplugged the refrigerator. Ma'am, there's food in here. Just leave it on the counter. They'll have to deal with that themselves. They emptied the refrigerator's contents onto the counter. Leftovers, condiments, the ingredients I'd bought for Christmas dinner. Then they disconnected it and wheeled it out, leaving a dark rectangular space on the floor where it had stood. Around 1 o'clock, I ordered pizza for all of us. We sat in the now empty dining room, boxes balanced on our laps, and they told me about other moves they'd done. Maria had been in the business for 10 years. James was saving money for graduate school. Kyle was working his way through community college. You're handling this really well, Maria said between bites. Most people get emotional when they move, especially older clients leaving a family home. I'm not leaving a family home, I said simply. I'm leaving a place I was never really welcome. There's a difference. She nodded slowly, understanding passing between us without more words needed. By 4 o'clock, the truck was packed. The house stood empty around us, echoing with each footstep. Bare walls, bare floors, bare counters. Only the bones of it remained, and the things that had truly belonged to John and Claire all along. I walked through each room one final time, not saying goodbye. Awesome psych. Just witnessing. The guest room where I'd slept. The kitchen where I'd cooked hundreds of meals. The living room where I'd played with Tommy. In the kitchen, I stopped at the counter. I pulled out Claire's note from my pocket and placed it there, weighted down with a decorative stone they'd bought on a vacation to California. Next to it, I placed the spare key they'd given me 2 years ago. Then I did something that made me smile. From my purse, I pulled out a small notepad and wrote my own note. John and Claire, I've moved to a new apartment. Everything I took belongs to me. I have receipts for every item if you need verification. The bills that arrived this week are on the counter. I've transferred all the utilities into your name as of December 27th. I hope Paris was lovely. Mom, I placed it next to Claire's note. A reply 2 years in the making. Maria appeared in the doorway. We're all loaded up, ma'am. Ready when you are. Just one moment. I looked around the kitchen one last time. At the empty space where the refrigerator had been, at the bare counters, at the naked windows without the curtains I'd bought. Then I picked up my purse, tucked my envelope under my arm, and walked toward the door. I didn't look back. The Meadowview Senior Living Complex became mine the moment I stepped through the door. Maria and her crew were wonderful. They arranged my furniture exactly where I wanted it, assembled my bed frame, even hung a few pictures when they saw me struggling with the hooks. By 7 that evening, my new apartment was transformed from an empty space into a home. You need anything else, ma'am? Maria asked as they prepared to leave. No, dear, you've all been wonderful, thank you. I tipped them generously, pressing cash into each of their hands despite their protests. They'd earned it. More than that, they'd been kind. In my experience, kindness deserves to be rewarded. After they left, I stood in the center of my living room and just breathed. Silence surrounded me, but it was different from the silence in John's house that Christmas morning. This wasn't absence. This was peace. I unpacked slowly over the next 2 days, taking my time. I hung Richard's photograph on the wall beside a window where the light would catch it in the mornings. I arranged my dishes in the kitchen cabinets, my good china, my everyday plates, the mugs I'd collected over the years. Each one had a story attached to it. The teapot Richard had given me for our 30th anniversary went on the counter where I could see it every morning. White porcelain with delicate pink roses painted on the sides. Friday evening, I heard a knock on my door. I opened it to find an elderly woman standing there, probably around my age, with silver hair cut in a stylish bob and bright eyes behind purple-framed glasses. She held a covered dish in her hands. Hello, she said cheerfully. I'm Dorothy from 3F down the hall. Alice mentioned you just moved in. I thought you might appreciate something for dinner. Moving is exhausting. I felt my throat tighten unexpectedly at the kindness. That's so thoughtful. Please, come in. She stepped inside, looking around approvingly. Oh, you've already made it feel like home. That's a gift. Thank you. Would you like some tea? I just made a pot. I'd love some. We sat at my small kitchen table, and Dorothy told me about the building, the book club on Tuesday evenings, the weekend movie nights, the garden plots out back that residents could use in the summer. It's a good community here, she said. People look out for each other, but everyone respects boundaries too. That sounds perfect. She stayed for an hour, and by the time she left, I felt like I'd made my first friend in my new life. That night, I ate the casserole Dorothy had brought, chicken and vegetables, simple but delicious, and watched the sun set through my balcony window. The sky turned orange, then pink, then deep purple. My phone, which I'd left on the kitchen counter, began to buzz. I heard it through the open balcony door. A persistent vibration. Once, twice, 3 times. Then it stopped. Then it started again. I took another bite of my casserole, watching the stars begin to appear in the darkening sky, and smiled to myself. Whatever it was could wait. 4 days. That's how long it took for the storm to arrive. I'd spent those days settling in, meeting neighbors, learning the rhythms of my new building. On Tuesday, I went to the book club Dorothy had mentioned. On Wednesday, I explored the neighborhood, finding a small cafe that served excellent coffee and a library just 2 blocks away. My phone had been buzzing intermittently, but I'd ignored it. 23 missed calls by Wednesday evening, multiple voicemails, text messages that piled up, unread. Finally, Wednesday night, I made myself a cup of chamomile tea and sat down on my new sofa to face whatever awaited me. The first text was from John, sent Sunday afternoon at 4:17 p.m. Mom, we just got home. Where are you? Please call us. The next one came 10 minutes later. Mom, what happened to the house? Everything's gone. Call me right now. Then they came rapid fire. Mom, this isn't funny. We're calling the police. Where are you? Are you safe? Mom, please answer your phone. I sipped my tea slowly, reading each message with calm detachment. There were voicemails, too. I put the phone on speaker and listened. The first was John's voice, strained and high-pitched. Mom, oh God, Mom, where are you? We came home and the house is empty. Someone took everything. Please call us back. The second was Claire, her voice sharp with anger poorly disguised as concern. Nina, we need to speak with you immediately. Something's happened and we need to know if you're all right. Call us! The messages grew more frantic, then more demanding. By the last one, John's voice had shifted from worried to angry. Mom, I know you're getting these messages. Whatever point you think you're making, this isn't the way to do it. Call me back. We need to talk about this like adults. I set the phone down and finished my tea. The next morning, I finally called him back. He answered on the first ring. Mom, where have you been? We've been worried sick. I've been settling into my new apartment, I said calmly. I left you a note explaining everything. A note? Mom, the house is empty. The furniture, the appliances, everything's gone. Everything I paid for, yes. I took my belongings when I moved out. There was a long pause. Your belongings? Mom, that was our furniture. Our things. No, John. They were mine. I have receipts for every single item. My name is on every purchase. But you gave those things to us. They were gifts. Were they? I asked gently. Or did I buy them because I was living there and contributing to the household? Did you ever ask if they were gifts, or did you just assume? Another pause. I could hear Claire's voice in the background, sharp and insistent. Mom, this is crazy, John said. You can't just take everything and leave. I can, actually. I did. Everything I removed from that house belongs to me legally. If you'd like, I can provide you with copies of all the receipts. We don't want receipts, his voice cracked. We want to know why. Why would you do this? I took a breath. Because you left me alone on Christmas morning, John. You took your wife and son to Paris and left me a note. A note. After 2 years of me paying your bills, watching your child, cooking your meals, making myself small enough to fit into whatever space you'd allow me, you left me a note. We thought you wouldn't enjoy the trip. You didn't think about me at all, I said, my voice still calm but firm. You made a decision that was convenient for you, and you didn't even have the courage to tell me to my face. You left a note. Mom, I'm sorry. We should have talked to you. We should have… Yes, you should have. But you didn't. And that helped me understand something important. I wasn't living with family. I was living with people who found me useful. That's not fair, isn't it? John, be honest. When was the last time you asked me what I wanted, what I needed? When was the last time my comfort or happiness was part of your decision-making? Silence. I heard Claire on the phone one night, I continued. She said you couldn't ask me to leave because you'd be lost without my money. My money, John, not me. My money. Mom, I don't know what you think you heard, but I know what I heard. And I know what I felt every day in that house. Useful, convenient, taken for granted, but never truly valued. So you just left? You took everything and disappeared? I moved out and took my belongings, yes. The same way you went to Paris without telling me. We both made choices, John. Mine just happened to have consequences you didn't like. I could hear him breathing heavily on the other end. When he spoke again, his voice was different, colder. You've made your point, Mom. I hope you're happy with yourself. Actually, I am, I said softly. For the first time in 2 years, I'm happy. I'm in my own space, surrounded by my own things, living my own life. I'm not trying to fit into someone else's idea of what I should be. So that's it? You're just done with us? I'm done being used, John. If you want a relationship with me, a real one, where we both matter, my door is open, but I won't go back to being invisible in my own life. Another long pause. I need to think about this. Take all the time you need. I'll be here. I hung up and set the phone down. Outside my window, the morning sun was bright and clear. Dorothy was in the courtyard, tending to the winter plants. A couple I'd met at book club was walking their small dog. My new life was here, small, simple, and entirely mine. I never heard from John or Claire again. No apology, no attempt to rebuild. Just silence. It hurt sometimes. Late at night, I'd think about Tommy and wonder if he remembered me. Wonder what they'd told him about where Grandma Nina had gone. But I didn't regret my choice. Not for a moment. Because I'd learned something important. You can't make people value you. You can only decide to value yourself. And I did. Every morning, I woke in my apartment, made coffee in my kitchen, sat on my balcony watching the world wake up. I valued myself. Dorothy became a close friend. The book club became a weekly highlight. I started teaching watercolor classes in the community room. I traveled to visit Margaret, took a weekend trip to the mountains, joined a theater group. I lived. Not as someone's mother or grandmother or ATM, just as Nina. 68 years old, finally learning what it meant to be free. 1 year later, on Christmas morning, I woke in my apartment surrounded by peace. Dorothy came over for breakfast. We exchanged small gifts. She gave me a beautiful journal. I gave her a scarf I'd knitted. We spent the afternoon playing cards and laughing. It was the best Christmas I'd had in years. Before you go, I want to thank you for listening to my story. If it resonated with you, if you've ever felt invisible or taken for granted, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Share your thoughts, your own experiences, or just let me know you were here. And please hit that like button and subscribe. These stories matter because they remind us we're not alone. Thank you for being part of this community. Until next time.